You've probably heard the story, right? The night Martians landed in New Jersey and America just freaked out. It's a legendary tale. But what if I told you that's not quite what happened? Let's dig into the real story behind Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. I mean, that's the central question, isn't it? Could one radio show really fool an entire nation into thinking aliens were invading? It sounds kind of crazy to us now. For years, though, everyone just accepted it as fact. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that myth and find out what actually went down that night. Okay, so before we even get to the broadcast itself, we have to set the stage. You got to understand the world it was born into. See, this wasn't just some random Sunday night in America. The whole country was, well, it was on edge. Think about it. It was 1938. The Great Depression was still very much a reality. People were struggling. At the same time, you had this rising tension in Europe. The threat of another world war was looming. And how did people get their news? The radio. Radio was everything. It was like the internet, TV, and social media all rolled into one. It was this trusted voice coming right into your home, telling you what was happening in the world, live. And right into the middle of all this anxiety steps our guy, Orson Welles. This guy was a phenom, only 23 years old and already known as this boy genius of theater and radio. He was running a show called the Mercury Theater on the air, and he loved to push the envelope. He was always looking for a way to do something new, something shocking. So that brings us to the big night, October 30th, 1938, Halloween Eve. His show is set to adapt H.G. Wells's classic sci-fi novel, The War of the Worlds. A pretty standard idea, right? But Orson Welles, well, he had a little something special planned. He decided to do it in a style that was super new and honestly kind of scary for people back then. The docudrama. What's that? Well, instead of just acting out a play, he was going to make it sound like a real news broadcast. Like you're just listening to music, and then suddenly the program is interrupted with urgent live updates. And the way they structured it was just brilliant. It starts off totally normal. You hear a weather report, some nice dance music, then bam, an interruption, a news bulletin. Then back to the music, then another, more urgent interruption. They built the tension so perfectly, going from a weird meteor landing to a full-blown invasion, complete with fake interviews with scientists and officials and everything. Just imagine, you're sitting in your living room, you turn on the radio late, and this is what you hear breaking into the music. It's chilling. If you missed that first 60 seconds where they said it was a play, you would absolutely think this was real. It was designed to sound as real as humanly possible. So what happened? Did America collectively lose its mind? Well, this is where the story you think you know really begins. The legend of the mass panic. Yeah, this is the version we've all heard for decades, right? Millions of people believing the invasion was real, phone lines jammed, people jumping in their cars trying to escape. Pure, unadulterated chaos, especially on the East Coast. It's an incredible story, but is it the true story? Okay, let's pump the brakes on the legend for a second and look at the actual facts. Because when historians and researchers really started digging into what happened that night, a much different picture started to come into focus. First up, the audience. The legend says millions panicked, but the total number of people even listening to the show in the first place was only about 6 million. Now, that's not a small number, for sure, but it's just a slice of the American population back then. But here's the real kicker. You want to know what most of America was actually listening to that night? Not Orson Welles. The vast majority, we're talking over 80%, were tuned into the biggest show in the country, a comedy show called the Chase and Sanborn Hour. Wells's broadcast, it only had about 6% of the audience. 6%. So once you see those numbers, the whole idea of a nationwide panic just kind of falls apart. Now, were some people scared? Oh, for sure, absolutely. But it wasn't a national phenomenon. It was more like small pockets of fear, here and there. Mostly people who, tuned in late, missed the intro, and were already on edge because of everything else going on in the world. Okay, so if the panic wasn't really a huge national thing, why do we have this story of mass hysteria? Well, you can thank the newspapers. See, back then, newspapers and radio were huge rivals. They were fighting for eyeballs, or ears, and advertising dollars. So when this happened, the paper saw their chance. They printed these wild, sensational headlines about the radio panic to make their competitor look irresponsible and dangerous. They basically took a few small incidents and blew them up into a national crisis.
Which leads to the really interesting question, doesn't it? If the mass panic was mostly hype, why are we still talking about it today? Why did that myth stick around for so long?
Well, there are a few reasons. But maybe the biggest one is it's just a better story, you know? A thrilling tale about how powerful the media is and how easily people can be fooled. It's this great cautionary tale. And as it got told and retold in books and movies over the years, the legend just grew and grew until it completely overshadowed the more complicated truth. So, in the end, the real legacy of this broadcast wasn't the panic itself. It was the conversation that came after. It was this huge wake-up call. For the first time, America really had to think about the power of radio. It sparked this massive debate about media responsibility, about ethics, about trust, questions we're, frankly, still dealing with today. And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? The story of War of the Worlds isn't really about Martians. It's about us. It's about how new media can totally warp our sense of reality and how quickly a story, true or not, can spread. And it makes you wonder, in our world of social media, deepfakes, and AI, are we really any less vulnerable to this kind of thing today?